Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. My name's Elizabeth, and today I'm going to talk about why I fired my financial advisor. So do you need one? It's totally up to you, but I'm going to share why we started with an advisor and then why we're getting rid of them. All right, so first, why would you even need a financial advisor? Well, a few years ago, we learned about investing, and I learned about all these tax advantaged accounts and these things that you can be doing with your money and investing to make your money work for you. You want to employ your money if you want to be rich. I've always been a saver, since I was 12 years old. I saved so much money. I even saved our first $100,000 by just saving alone without investing, which is incredible. But we want our money to work. And so it's really important to get advice from people who are educated on the topic, right? If you want advice on teaching and education, you go to a teacher. If you want advice on business, you go to someone who has built a business. And so same thing with finance, you go, okay, let's go to an advisor, someone who can mentor you and teach you how to invest. And so that was something that I did because I didn't want to make mistakes. I wanted to make sure that the money was being allocated correctly. But we've learned that we can do it ourselves. And once you take the time, if you take the time to learn what you want, and I'll go over these things in just a little bit, it will make a huge difference. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so the first reason and why we're getting rid of our financial advisor is because we already know what to do. We spent the time. I've learned so much more over the last few years where I feel confident enough to go ahead and do it. I can run the investments. I know which investments we're choosing. I also know and familiar with the platform, and I know actually how to set it up and buy the actual stocks. So I know what I need to buy, I know how to buy it, and I can automate it as well so that I don't have to just sit there every month and make sure I put it in. It's really not that hard if you learn it. And we learned that it's a huge fee over time. And so we decided, hey, why don't we just take it back ourselves and automate it, and so that we get that extra money in the long run. The second reason, like I alluded to, is the fee. And so it might not seem like much. And some people say 1% over time or less than 1%, you're good. So if you really feel like you need the advice, like we went with Vanguard, there's 3 main brokerages, which I highly recommend. You can choose Vanguard, Fidelity, or Charles Schwab. There's many brokerages out there, but if you choose one of those 3, they are really reputable and they have a ton of assets under management and a lot of options. We chose Vanguard for a variety of reasons. I'm happy to share those if you're interested, but it's very reputable. The costs and the fees were very low when you are exchanging or buying different assets and index funds and funds. And so we went with them. But it's really important to do your research and to figure that out for yourself. Okay, so let's do some math here. Let's do an example. So the fee, you're like, well, it's probably not that much. It's 1%. Some do 2 to 3%. And you really want to avoid those. And even with Vanguard, it was like 0.45% or something like that. So it wasn't even 1%. But doing the math, what 1% might cost you would be if you have $3 million in assets under management and the typical fee of 0.8 to 1%, which might not seem like a lot to you guys, that's going to cost you about $25,000 to $30,000 every single year. And so over time, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you have multiple millions in assets and in management, then that's going to eat at your profit. And so my rationale when I first got started was, okay, it's a very small fee. Also, if we don't know, I'd rather pay someone who knows so that we're at least getting invested and we'll make more money in the long term. And so it's worth paying that. And so some people, you really have to do the cost and go, would I make more with the advisor? And so with my strategy and what we're doing and with index funds, we wouldn't make more with an advisor. And it's not like they're doing something super complicated that I can't do. And so that's where it's like, why are we paying for that? And there's actually an option if you want financial advice, a better option instead of paying for all of the assets under management and for the portfolio and they get a percentage, there's something else that you guys can do. So let's talk about it. One of the best things you can do instead of paying and giving them a flat rate, like, hey, you get 1% of all of our investments, because that could be millions of dollars and that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars that they make back, or millions, depending on how much you put in. But what you could do is hire them by the hour. So for their advice. And so that's a great thing. That's something we could have done as well. And it's really important to look into this because you can save so much money. Say, hey, I would like some advice from you. I know too, if you've ever seen Nisha in her financial channel, she talks about an instance where she owned some investment properties and she was going to have to pay $40,000 in taxes, $40,000. And she was like, I do not want to pay that. How can I avoid that? And so she chalked out $250 to talk to a professional, a financial advisor, and a tax advisor, and they saved her $40,000. There was a loophole that she could use, and she only spent $250 instead of $40,000. So to me, that would have made sense, right? Hey, can I talk to a advisor let's go ahead and let's talk about my financial situation. Let's talk about financial goals. Let's talk about, hey, do you know how to invest? Can you show me? And then you spend that hourly rate, and maybe you spend an hour, maybe you spend 2 hours, but $250, $1,000, that's going to be a lot less than your whole portfolio. So that's an option to consider if you're interested. Or another option is just to get educated, watch a video or read a book. I'm thinking of doing an actual video walking you through how to go into a brokerage account, pick the index funds. I'm doing a video on index funds that are very common if that's an interesting route to you and what you want to do. It's all very personal, but that's what a lot of people and experts recommend is index funds, and then showing you how to actually buy it and be confident, and then the mistakes that people make so you can avoid it. And so if you educate yourself and you trust yourself, or if you work with your spouse or partner to double check you and get it all set up, or have the advisor, you show them, hey, am I doing this right? Can I pay you $200, $100 to make sure I'm doing it right? Then you're good to go, and you save all that extra money. And some people say, well, what about the time? I don't want to spend the time every month worrying about it. You can automate things. Like I automate my YouTube videos. I don't just sit there and post every day. I record, I edit, I upload, and then I schedule them out so they automatically upload at 6 a.m. every day. In order to do this yourself, these are the 5 things that I think you need to learn and to know in order to feel comfortable. And so number 1, you need to decide what brokerage. I talked about Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard. You could do research on those and pick which one is best for you. A lot of people say Fidelity has a really good user interface and is very user-friendly. Vanguard is a classic one that a lot of people used. I've used Charles Schwab before and it worked fine. I know my grandparents used them and I didn't have any problems with them. So definitely look into that. But decide your brokerage. Number 2, decide what to invest in. So what do you want to do? And a lot of people recommend these index funds as being your core bulk because you can make about 10% over time. And a lot of the investments, if you invest in Apple, it might not bring that same return. Some people like doing that and investing in individual stocks. And so you can look into that for yourself. But honestly, you could purchase those as well. You don't necessarily need an advisor to do that as well. And there's day traders and people, and Humphrey Yang, another financial YouTuber, he talks about that as well, where one of his friends, he invested in GameStop early and made like $60,000 on it. But then he's lost a lot of money because his friend will say, hey, maybe invest in this. It looks like it's going to go up, and then it goes down. So to me, I just want to pick, all right, what's going to give me the average return over time? I'll stick with it. I'll stick with it for the long run. At least my money's working for me and I'm good. And I'll find other ways to make more money and get more assets as well. So decide what to invest in. Number 3, you want to decide what accounts. And so there's tax advantaged accounts. So you can buy the funds. So say we have an index fund like the S&P 500 is a classic one, right? There's these little buckets that you can buy this index fund in. And so, for example, retirement accounts at work with a 401k, you can purchase an index fund or the S&P 500 within the bucket of the 401k. It's just a little house that you can purchase it in. And so same thing, we talked about Roth IRAs on my channel. If you haven't checked that out, check out that video. It's an essential tool for a double tax advantage account where the money is taxed up front, but then once you put the money in, it grows tax-free, and then you take it out tax-free. You don't have to pay capital gains, which is amazing. And so a Roth IRA, you can buy the S&P 500 and index fund within that little house. And so decide what you want to do. You can open just a general brokerage account as well. The taxes are going to be different. You might have to pay a little bit more on tax. You don't have all those tax shielded benefits, but we have a brokerage account as well once we maxed out and took advantage of our tax shielded accounts. But that is an option. And so figure out what house and what accounts you want. And then you also want to buy shares. So figure out how to buy the shares. So once you pick, all right, we're going to Vanguard. I am going to open a Roth IRA and just a regular brokerage account. Then I'm going to buy this index fund. And so then how do I buy it? And so I put the money, I put in $1,000, and then you can buy a certain amount of shares. The thing with me is it's not just $1,000. You can buy $1,000 worth of shares because maybe it costs $257. And so you could only buy a certain amount of shares, and then you'd have to wait till you get more money and then buy the rest of the shares. But that's a critical part, and I think a lot of people get scared of that part, but you can learn it. And lastly, you want to automate it. And so once you figure out how to buy those shares, you put the money in the account, you can automate it and it will invest automatically for you so you don't forget. One reason why I didn't initially do this, and I didn't do it by myself, even though I learned a lot about financial education, I wanted just to get it set up and talk to someone and have someone to work through things with. And we had a ton of calls. What's cool about Vanguard is you can call them and set as many appointments and meetings as you want, and it's included in the price. And so we had a lot of really good conversations up front, but a lot of people are scared they're going to make a mistake. And so what you can do if you're fearful of something, one of the best tips is to educate yourself. And so what are the common mistakes that investors make or people make when investing? And so one of the main ones is like with a Roth IRA, you can put $7,000 a year currently in it. And so say you do that, right? You put $7,000. But there's a lot of stories where they put $7,000 for 7 years, and that's $49,000, but none of it grew. It still said $49,000. They're like, what happened? They put the money in the account, but then they didn't do that last step and actually purchase the investments. And so to me, I was like, oh no, what if I do that? But if you learn actually how to do it, you have a system and you check on yourself, then you're good. Some people are like, you know what? I'd rather lose the money and just make sure that someone does it, and that's your choice. But learn about what the common mistakes are and then figure out how to avoid them. The last thing I want to say is determine what your goals are, determine where you are at. And so it might be worth it to hire a financial advisor. It might be worth it to hire them for the long term. It also might be worth it to just go with that hourly rate and say, hey, can you help me? It might be worth it to read a few more books and go, I can wait a few more weeks or a few more months before I get started, and it will be fine in the end. So you have to decide, what are your goals? What do you want? And there's lots of things you can invest in, but there's so much information and free information out there that can help you to invest in Bitcoin or gold or index funds or real estate, any asset that you want, but you want to get your money working for you. And so that's the first step, but then you do have to take action. And you want to try to mitigate risk, but at the end of the day, don't be so fearful of making a mistake that you never do it, right? You don't want to be stuck in that analysis paralysis and just like trying to make the best decision. And I know I faced that when thinking back to when I started investing. I really didn't want to make a mistake. I really wanted to also make the best decision. How can we make the best choice? But you're not always going to make the best decision. And why do you have to? It's okay. And you can always change it. If you make most things, you can make an adjustment with. Most mistakes are not like fatal or will be the end of the world. So it's okay. Great, so that's why we fired our financial advisor. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. Feel free to like and subscribe for more. Let me know if you have any questions or videos that you want to see, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys, keep learning, working, and growing. You got this.